For the sake of this post, I will call my brother Tim. I am almost 26 years old, and for the majority of my childhood, I was moved from house to house without ever feeling like I belonged. By the time I was 9, I think I had lived in 17 different foster families. Nowhere wanted me. I was troubled and couldn't form emotional bonds because of how awfully I had been treated. So, I acted awfully towards every set of foster parents I got, until I was moved in with an amazing couple named P and S. I was almost 10 by this point. Everyone was telling me this would be my new family, but I had heard it all before and didn't believe a word. P and S already had a child, Tim, who was 17 years old and an amazing person whom I grew to love. My new parents were everything I needed at that point. They were caring, understanding, they gave me space, but let me express my affection to them when I wanted to, without ever pressuring me. After a year, I started to believe what everyone told me. They were my new family. Obviously, I'm leaving out a lot here for the sake of the character limit, but what I'm trying to say is I grew to think of them as my real parents, and they grew to think of me as their real son. Sadly, Tim got addicted to drugs in his early 20s and has been in and out of hospitals and rehabs ever since. P passed away after being in a fatal crash. My one regret in life is that I never called P Dad to his face. I was too scared of rejection, and so every time I tried, the word just never came out. I just wish I could go back and say it to him. After P died, I plucked up the courage to call S Mom a few times, and she cried when I first did. She said they had been waiting for years, and that dad was so proud of me. Frick. It still hurts so much even now. Less than 6 months later, S found out she had lung cancer and sadly passed away in less than a year. Tim was a shell of the person I met at 9 years old. It hurt seeing him like that. Our parents had a lot of saving, and Mom made me promise to give Tim the time to get sober. She told me to not give him any access to any money, no matter how hard it was. I kept the promise I made to her. No matter how much he begged and bullied and guilted me, I never gave him a penny. Mom told me to keep it for 5 years after she passed, and if he wasn't completely sober by then, I was to use it to buy a house and set myself up. 5 years passed. Tim had made no progress in becoming sober, so I did what Mom told me to, and I used his share to set myself up. It's been 3 years since then, and Tim is finally sober and has been asking for his part of the inheritance. I told him it was gone, and he went crazy at me, saying I had no right to take his parents' money like that. Now, I can't help but feel so guilty. I think I should have waited at least 10 years, and am considering selling my house to give him his half. My wife says not to. I don't know what to do. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. It was your money. Your parents gave it to you. That was their wish, and you honored it. You faithfully kept to their terms, and I'm sure would have rather had a sober brother to support you after the death of your parents than a new house, but so it is. Your parents could have put it in a trust or asked you to put it aside for him indefinitely, but that's not the choice they made. But there's nothing stopping you from helping him out. I'd strongly advise against giving someone so fresh into recovery a lump sum of money though. That's how people end up dead. Comment 2. No idiots here, but it's obvious that your parents just didn't want to enable Tim's addiction. This money was supposed to go to Tim. They just didn't want it to languish unused if Tim never became sober. To respect the spirit of their directions, you should still help Tim out by helping him out financially and paying him out over time. Don't let him relapse because he doesn't have the resources to maintain housing and progress in life. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post, and I've got to get this off my chest. So, after I told Tim the money was gone, he lost it. He started showing up at my house, yelling and causing scenes. My neighbors were starting to complain, and my wife was scared. I couldn't believe this was the same brother I looked up to as a kid. Back when we were younger, Tim was the one who taught me how to ride a bike. He'd spend hours in the driveway, holding onto the back of the seat until I found my balance. I remember the pride in his eyes the first time I pedaled down the street without falling. That memory feels like it's from another lifetime now. After one particularly bad argument, Tim stormed off and did something I never thought he'd do. He went to our old family lawyer and demanded to see the will. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, had been like an uncle to us. He was the one who helped P&S with the adoption paperwork when they took me in. He knew the whole story, how Mom had made me promise to keep the money from Tim until he was sober. Mr. Henderson called me, sounding really uncomfortable. He said Tim was threatening to sue me for his share of the inheritance. I was floored. I couldn't believe Tim would go this far. I tried to explain to Mr. Henderson that I was just following Mom's wishes, but he said, legally, Tim might have a case since he was sober now. The next day, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years, our old foster care caseworker, Mrs. Jenkins. She had somehow heard about the situation and wanted to offer her support. She reminded me of how far I'd come since those early days, bouncing from home to home, and how proud P&S would be of the man I'd become. It was a bittersweet reminder of the family I'd lost and the one I was trying to protect. Meanwhile, my wife was at her wit's end. She couldn't understand why I was even considering giving Tim the money after everything he'd put us through. We'd been high school sweethearts, and she'd been there through it all. The good times with P&S, Tim's downward spiral, and the loss of our parents. She was my rock, but this situation was shaking us to the core. Then, one evening, Tim showed up at our door, unannounced. He was different, calmer. He asked if we could talk, just the two of us. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared countless family dinners with P&S. Tim looked me in the eyes and apologized. He said he'd been talking to a therapist and realized how much pain he'd caused. He didn't want the money anymore, he just wanted his brother back. I was torn. Part of me wanted to believe him, to forgive and forget. But another part of me remembered all the promises he'd broken before. And there was something else, a nagging feeling that he was hiding something. A few days later, my suspicions were confirmed. I got a call from an old friend of Tim's, someone who'd been in and out of rehab with him. He said Tim had been bragging about a plan to get his hands on the inheritance one way or another. My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was stacking up against Tim. I confronted Tim about it, and he denied everything. He said his friend was lying, that he was just jealous of Tim's sobriety. But when I pressed him, his story started to crumble. He finally admitted that he'd been thinking about the money, but he swore he'd changed his mind after our talk. I didn't know what to believe. The brother I once idolized was now a stranger to me, capable of manipulation and deceit. And yet, there was a part of me that still hoped for the best, that wanted to cling to the remnants of our family. The conflict with Tim was taking its toll on my marriage too. My wife and I were arguing more than ever. She couldn't understand why I kept giving Tim chances, and I couldn't explain it to her. It was like I was trying to hold on to the last piece of P&S, even if it was through the broken relationship with my brother. Now, I'm stuck in this impossible situation. Do I stand my ground and keep the house, the symbol of the life I've built with my wife? Or do I sell it to give Tim what he's asking for, potentially sacrificing my own future for the sake of family peace? It's a decision that weighs on me every day, and I'm no closer to finding an answer. Mill sent pics of my kids to SIL, and she insults them on Twitter. I confront my L, and she apologizes and deletes the pics. Her ex-husband advises me not to kick her out, but I'm still angry. Sil apologizes and wants to be part of the family again, but I refuse to forgive her. I catch my husband and Sil meeting closely. She sends me a taunting message with a pic of them together. I reject her when she shows up to apologize. I wonder if I made the right choice. My husband is torn between supporting me and believing in his sister. My sister-in-law is a vile person. My husband and the rest of his family do not speak to her, or so I thought. I was having a very nice day some time ago when a friend suddenly sent me a screenshot. It was a picture of someone on Twitter saying horrible things about my children, who are 3 and 5 years old. I was horrified because I don't put pictures of them on social media. My friend explained that person A, who insulted my kids, was arguing with person B, whose header was a picture of my children. Person A assumed they were person B's kids and insulted them as a comeback. My friend said she was pretty sure I wasn't person B because they had some weird things in their bio/tweet history, that I would never say or believe in. I informed my husband, and we basically freaked out trying to figure out who person B was and why they had a picture of our children. I then remembered that I sent that picture of the kids to my mother-in-law, MIL, and I even checked our texts to make sure. Mother-in-law has been staying with us for a week or so we waited for her to come home from wherever. Then my husband explained what happened. She seemed concerned as well, until my husband asked if she sent that picture to anyone else. She immediately went red in the face and started avoiding eye contact and everything. She then said she sent it to my sister-in-law. In fact, she's been sending her several pictures of my children. I can't even lie, I saw red. It made a lot of sense too, because after looking through person B's account, they sounded just like her. Mother-in-law apologized and said she was just trying to make her daughter feel less isolated. But I was so incredibly angry. I told my mother-in-law that all I'm hearing from her is utter nonsense, and she doesn't have to worry about her poor daughter being isolated because she can pack up her chute and go live with her. Mother-in-law immediately started apologizing and said she didn't think my sister-in-law would save the pictures. She swore to never do it again, and even deleted the pictures of my children off her phone. I couldn't bring myself to care. The next day, while she was leaving, she said I was being too harsh. I told her to stop talking to me. My husband is completely on board with this, but he's busy with his sister and making sure she changes her Twitter header. It did end up being her. I can't explain the amount of rage I still feel, but mother-in-law did seem very apologetic. And my father-in-law, her ex-husband, even reached out to me saying that my anger is valid, but that I shouldn't kick her out because I've left her in a very tough spot, especially since she had no bad intentions. I'm afraid my anger is blinding me and my husband, so I'm just curious. Am I the jerk? Edit. Just to clarify, person A saved the picture of my kids, taking it from my sister-in-law, person B's header, and then tweeted a response to a random tweet with the picture attached. It only had around 10 likes, but the views were extremely high, and you can't even tell who might have saved the picture. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. She had zero bad intentions. Nonsense. Sister-in-law is a person with whom you intentionally do not communicate. Mother-in-law decides that your wishes do not matter and sends photos to sister-in-law. Sister-in-law then posts them. Bad things are said, you'll find out. Mother-in-law acknowledges sharing photos. Mother-in-law absolutely created the problem, not the idiot. Comment 2. It's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. She had bad intentions. She knew this was something you wouldn't approve of, so she didn't ask, and she did it anyway. She's not remorseful, she's just regretting she got caught out. Not the idiot. If father-in-law is a flying monkey, then he can take her in. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. It's been a week since the whole Twitter fiasco with my sister-in-law, and let me tell you, things have gotten even more intense. After my last update, my husband and I thought we had everything under control. My sister-in-law had changed her Twitter header, and my mother-in-law was out of our house. But that was just the calm before the storm. A couple of days ago, my husband got a call from his sister, the one we don't talk to. She was crying, saying she was sorry, and that she missed being part of the family. My husband, who's always had a soft spot for her despite everything, agreed to meet her for coffee to talk things out. I was against it, but he insisted it was the right thing to do. Now here's where things get steamy. I didn't trust her one bit, so I decided to drive past the coffee shop they were at, just to make sure everything was on the up and up. And what do I see? My husband and his sister, sitting way too close for comfort, laughing and touching each other's hands. My heart dropped to my stomach. I felt betrayed, not just by her, but by him. I confronted him as soon as he got home. He was shocked that I'd seen them, and he tried to explain that it was all innocent and that they were just catching up. But I couldn't shake the image from my mind. It was like all the trust we'd built over the years was shattered in an instant. The next day, while I was still reeling from the sight of them together, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of my husband and his sister at the coffee shop, with a text that read, "Looks like family isn't as estranged as you thought. my blood ran cold. Someone was watching us, and now they were taunting me. I showed my husband the message, and he turned white as a sheet. He swore he didn't know who could have sent it, but the damage was done. We were both scared and confused, not knowing who was targeting our family or why. In the midst of all this, my father-in-law reached out again. He told me about how my husband and his sister used to be inseparable as kids, always getting into trouble together. He said that their falling out had hurt the whole family, and he thought maybe this was a chance to mend fences. But after what I'd seen, I couldn't see it that way. The confrontation with my husband turned into a full-blown argument. He accused me of not trusting him, and I accused him of not considering my feelings. It was a mess. We both said things we probably shouldn't have, and now there's this tension between us that wasn't there before. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my sister-in-law showed up at our door yesterday. She wanted to apologize in person, to me and the kids, but I wasn't having any of it. I told her she had no right to just waltz back into our lives after everything she'd done. She started crying, saying she was lonely and that using the kids' picture was a cry for help. She said she wanted to be part of the family again, to have a relationship with her niece and nephew, but I couldn't forget the past so easily. The way she'd treated us, the things she'd said about my children, it was all too much. My husband tried to mediate, but I was firm. I told her she needed to leave and not come back. She left, but not before giving me a look that I couldn't quite read. It was a mix of sadness and something else, something darker. Now I'm left wondering if I made the right choice. My husband is quiet, and I can tell he's torn. He wants to believe in his sister, but he also wants to support me, and I'm just trying to protect my family, but it feels like everything is falling apart around me. Mom stole $35,000 from Grandma and owes Dad money, but when I confront her, she accuses me of elder abuse. Oh boy, Grandpa gets involved. About a month ago, I was on the phone with my grandmother. Mind you, she is 80 years old, so she is getting pretty old, and her memory is starting to deteriorate. My grandmother and I are very close. She tells me everything that is going on in her life. Well, one day she called me with some very upsetting news. My mom stole over $35,000 from her in fraudulent checks, and her bank's fraud department contacted her about it. The money had been taken over time, about 10 months. My grandma called me and basically didn't know what to do. She also revealed that this had happened before when I was born. I was shocked, and she mentioned calling my grandfather. They are divorced and have been for 30 years, and telling him. I myself did not know quite yet what to do with the info, so I sat with it for a few days. Then I got a text from my mother. She basically accused me of elder abuse, because she found out my grandmother 4 months prior sent me a check in the mail for $3,000 for my college graduation. Something in me snapped when I saw that text. I was furious. Mind you, my mom had also taken $16,000 that was passed down to me from when my dad died the same year, 2023, and had not paid me back as she promised she would. I basically called her out, and I told her that my grandmother knew about the money she had stolen, also for what she owed me from my father. She claimed it was for plane tickets that she needed to be reimbursed for, and that she needed my money to pay for lawyers and bills. My mom had told me a while back that she had a picture of my grandma's credit card to pay for plane tickets. And I asked her about that, and what tickets did she even need to be reimbursed for, and in what world it would amount to $35,000 over a period of 10 months. I told her I was fed up and would be contacting her dad. She lost it. I called my grandfather and explained everything. He was shocked and couldn't believe she would do it again. Now, my whole family, including my grandma, grandpa, stepbrother, and both my uncles, have stopped talking to her altogether. She texted me and told me that all her relationships are destroyed because of me. Basically, she told my grandmother that she is never paying her back. My grandmother asked her to, and even her bank is trying to pursue charges, but my grandma told them not to. She eventually did pay me back because of my grandfather. Nobody speaks to her. She is now totally isolated, and I feel bad about it every day. I feel really bad because at the end of the day, she is my mom, and I don't know if what I did was right. Am I the idiot? Update. Social services called me, and I guess Adult Protective Services were contacted by the bank. They are investigating my mom for elder abuse, and even though my grandma told them not to pursue charges, they may do it anyways because of her age and memory. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. She's convinced herself it wasn't a big deal, she wouldn't get caught, etc. She can't handle that she was wrong, so she's blaming you. Don't fall for it. The only one to blame here is her. She made her bed, and now she's going to lie in it. That bed, technically, should be in a jail cell, so she should count herself lucky. Comment 2. She texted me and told me all her relationships are destroyed because of me. Not the idiot. You didn't destroy her relationships. She did that all by herself. What you did do is protect your grandmother and any other family from hopefully ever ending up with more financial issues due to your mother. Now for the update. A lot has happened since my last post, and I've been on an emotional roller coaster. After I hung up with my grandfather, who was just as shocked as I was about my mom's actions, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I knew that confronting my mom was the right thing to do, but it also meant facing the reality that our family was now torn apart. My grandfather, who had been out of the picture for so long, stepped up in a way I never expected. He had always been a stern man, a bit distant since the divorce from my grandma. But when he heard about the situation, he took charge. He called my mom and had a long, heated conversation with her. I wasn't there, but I heard from my stepbrother that it was a showdown for the ages. My grandfather demanded that she pay back every penny to my grandma and me. In the midst of all this, my mom's isolation grew. She tried reaching out to me a few times, sending messages that swung wildly between apologies and accusations. She claimed she was under a lot of stress and that she never meant to hurt anyone. But then she'd turn around and say that we were all blowing things out of proportion. It was hard to keep track of her ever-changing stories. Then, 2 weeks ago, the most unexpected thing happened. My mom actually paid me back the $16,000 she owed me from my dad's inheritance. It was my grandfather's doing. He had somehow convinced her, or maybe pressured her, to do the right thing. I couldn't believe it when I saw the money in my account. It felt like a small victory in a sea of chaos. But the drama didn't end there. Remember how I mentioned that social services got involved? Well, they took the case seriously. They interviewed my grandma, who, despite her memory issues, was able to give them enough information to build a case against my mom. It was heartbreaking to see my grandma go through that, but at the same time, I was proud of her for standing up to my mom. The investigation by Adult Protective Services was thorough. They looked into the bank records, talked to family members, and even interviewed some of my mom's friends. It was a big deal, and the whole family was on edge, waiting to see what would happen. Then, just a few days ago, my mom called me. She was crying, really sobbing, and for the first time, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. She told me that facing the possibility of legal consequences had been a wake-up call for her. She realized she had hit rock bottom and needed to change. She said she was going to therapy and was trying to make amends. I was skeptical at first, but then she did something I never thought she would. She paid back a significant portion of the money she took from my grandma. It wasn't the full amount, but it was a start. My grandma was so relieved, she cried when I told her. It was a moment of healing for her and for me too. The family started to cautiously reconnect with my mom after that. My uncles, who had been furious with her, agreed to meet her for coffee. It was a tense meeting, but it ended with some hopeful words and a group hug that I think was the first step towards forgiveness. My stepbrother, who had been my rock through all of this, was the last to come around. He had been so angry with my mom for what she did to our grandma. But after seeing her make an effort to repay the stolen money and seek help, he agreed to talk to her. They had a long conversation, and he told me later that he could see she was trying to be better. As for me, I've been processing a lot of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and confused by my mom's actions, but seeing her take responsibility and work to make things right has given me a glimmer of hope. It's not going to be easy to rebuild the trust that was broken, but I'm willing to give her a chance. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.